Hi, welcome back to Power and Impact. I'm Jim McCann, and today we're joined by Anna Gifty. She's a terrific gal. We had her on stage at our groundbreaking women conference this spring. She really owned the room. Her expertise in terms of economics, her own personal experience growing up in Maryland, her family situation, how it gave birth to her attitude about women, women's roles in our economy, the economic impact they have on the economy, and the impact the economy and our business practices have on in particular, black women. Really interesting stuff. Keep an open mind and listen to someone who's lived it, is living it every day, and making a difference. Yeah, here in New York, we're on Long Island. I'm here with Michaela Barker, Michaela's playing extra duty today because she's on the team here and a producer of this event, but she had such an interest in you, Anna, especially after she met you at the Groundbreaking Women Conference.
Hmm.
I just saw that she had a passion for you and the work you're doing and your story. I said, well, why don't you sit in with me and
I love it.
help drag
I
the
love
great
it.
story out with
That's
Anna.
amazing. Thanks for coming, Michaela. We appreciate you, as always.
Of course, of course. When we connected at Groundbreaking Women's Summit, I was like, all the work that she's doing is amazing. I know you're co founder of the Sadie Collective, Fanta. That's my girl. And I'll even forgive you for going to Harvard because I am a Yale Bulldog, but it's fine. We'll put the beef aside for today. It's
I don't know.
okay.
I think it's going to come to fisticuffs.
It might. It might.
So, Anna, I'm intrigued by your story too, and especially being born in Africa, migrating here. How old were you
So
when your
it's an
family
interesting
moved
story.
here?
My parents got what we call like the visa lottery the year I was born. So literally the year I was born, about 3 months later, one of their friends filed for a like visa lottery, which is they randomly select who gets citizenship out of a pool of people who put their name in. And so they just happened to get it the year that I was born. So I was in Ghana for like 3 months and then we moved to the States. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So you don't
No,
remember
I
it that
don't. Yeah.
much.
But I've gone back a couple times. It's great. I love going back to Ghana. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot
I
of family
do.
there.
Pretty much like our intended like entire extended family is there, especially on my mom's side. And her family just keeps growing because people have kids there. So yeah, it's great.
That's a concept that seems a little foreign here.
People are having kids here, but yes, I hear you. So
Emigrated
we
to
actually
Maryland.
immigrated to Minnesota first. So we lived in Minneapolis. Yes. So technically a Midwest girl. And then we moved to Maryland. We mainly moved to like the Howard County, Maryland area, and that was pretty much where I was born and or not born, but more so raised.
Absolutely. And so, speaking about that, let's talk about what double tax is about.
So the Double Tax is essentially a book about how expensive it is to be a woman, like at its core, right? And I think that this is a conversation.
You mean more expensive than it is to be
Yes,
a
but
man?
also I just think it's really expensive. Like just the extra time and effort and money that women are just spending to exist is a lot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like
I always wondered this. I worked in a men and boys clothing store as a young person. Why are women's clothes more expensive than men's?
so this is what we could call the pink tax. This idea that, companies will market the same product to men and women, but they'll upcharge women, or women will get lesser bang for their buck. So, what a lot of people have found over multiple studies is that it's not like a flat thing that happens. There's certain products where that applies more than others, but essentially, I would say this, people profit off of women's insecurities and even the things that we are very secure about, but at the end of the day it's like women are the ones who are bearing the brunt of the cost anyhow. And so I don't know why they're doing that, but I know that they are doing that and that it's not fair. So that's what this book is ultimately getting at, and then how that really cuts across racial identity and racial lines. So thinking about how different women might be spending more to exist as compared to other women, and then what those cost gaps tell us about society as a whole and how we can actually start to address some of the problems that we're seeing in communities across the country and beyond.
Michaela, what would Anna know about numbers?
I don't know if she's qualified to know much about numbers. She just is getting a PhD from Harvard in their policy school and has, a huge background in economics. But speaking of
And an undergraduate degree in mathematics. So she
right. So
not only can she add, but she can multiply.
absolutely, absolutely. So I'm really curious, how did you start off being interested in this field, whether it's mathematics, economics, policy, like what got you interested in this
Yeah, so
space?
when I was growing up, I am a Head Start alum, by the way. Shout out to Head Start. I think I've always been interested in logic, right? So I'm a critical thinker through and through. Let me critically think about what's going on around me. Let me critically think about the world around me. And so I think at some point in high school, I took an Algebra 2 class. And up until that point, I was okay at math. You know what I'm saying? Like I was doing my math classes so I could like get to the next level, hopefully get my GPA up. But it wasn't until like in my Algebra 2 class, I had a teacher called Mr. Chicolella. Shout out to Mr. Chicolella. And I was in the class and everything he was saying was clicking in class. So I'm saying like, whoa, like I
Mm-hmm.
understand we were talking about invisible numbers. We were talking about, different derivations. And at some point I started acing our exams. So I got really good at math at that point, at least in that class, to the point where he was like, can you tutor other students? Can you help other students? And I realized that, oh my gosh, I love this teaching aspect of it as well, which obviously has come into play later on in my life. But what was interesting was I also had a teacher at the time later on who I spoke to who said, you ask too many questions. So I don't know if you can major in math. It might be too hard for you. And that deterred me from deciding to do math in college initially. So I ended up doing sort of the immigrant dream cycle, which is like you go and do pre med, then you discover actually it's not for you. You just use organic chemistry. Organic chemistry took me out. Cell biology took me out. I was sitting and listen. Because why am I rotating things in my head? Like this doesn't make sense. And so I basically was in my cell biology class one day, and the teacher was talking about signal transduction. That's the thing I remember her talking about. And I just remember sitting in the front because I can't see. I'm nearsighted. And I was like, I don't care about this. It's like, this is not how I want to use my time. And at the time, I was also doing research on malaria because I was interested in public health research. I wanted to sort of think about, how can I serve my community back in Ghana? And eventually, I remember just like riding on a bus, kind of put up a prayer and on a whim. And I was like, I think I need to change my major to math. I don't know why. I don't know how, but I think I'm just going to have to change it. At that point, I had changed my major like 5 times. I was lost. So my parents were just kind of like, please pick something so you
What are
graduate.
you
Right?
doing?
Like, we cannot afford to have you say an extra year. So long story short,
Just walk
right,
across the stage.
please.
Tell us about your
Yeah.
parents a little bit. They come to this country
Yes.
from Ghana. They won the
Yes.
visa lottery, settled in Minnesota. How did they come to then
So
go to
they really
Maryland?
prioritize education. So my mom was, a nurse back in Ghana. She's a nurse still here, but she like was very independent, pretty much at my age. Yeah, like a little bit younger than me, and so she's
She's wondering when you're going to
right.
go off the dole.
And
Yeah.
so she was really somebody who I think always cared about education, always cared about her children having education. So I have a brother and a sister who are about 13, 14 years older than me. So they're within 1 year of each other. And then there's a 13-year
Mhm.
gap until me. And I'm called the retirement baby. Though I don't know why you would have a baby in retirement. That's not my ministry, but alas. And so my dad is also someone who a lot of his travels are really steeped in his educational journey. So he's gone to different countries around the world to basically collect degrees. So he's been to, Sweden, he's been to Nigeria, all in the purpose of like furthering his education. And he's eventually gotten his PhD in epidemiology as a nurse. He's also working as a nurse as well. And so I think that they prioritized moving to Maryland because they had heard Maryland has really good schools. And so when we moved to Maryland, I was actually at one point in 3 schools at the same time in kindergarten. So I went to a school in the morning, went to the school in the afternoon, and then I did Head Start in the evening. And then a private school was opening up in the county. And the county required that that private school admit one student from Head Start full ride into the private school. And they selected me. So my entire life
Wow.
is really kind of
It's
faded.
do you guys buy lottery tickets? Because it seems to have worked a
Right.
few
That's a
times.
great question. No, I don't.
Listen, you're just like the lucky key here.
As they say in New York State, you got to be in
That's
it to win
right.
it.
That's right. But I often say that I think that that was like a very pivotal moment because from there, I mean, obviously Head Start set a
Yeah.
very excellent foundation, but that private school, I mean, the teacher to student ratio was very small. I remember every single teacher that taught me.
Is that where Mr.
No, Mr.
Chicoloa
Ciccolo was
was?
my next school that I also got pretty much a full ride to. And that was because the principal of the elementary school specifically recommended me to that school that I ended up getting a scholarship to, where I met Mr. Ciccolo as well.
So he was a big influence in your life. Have you, does
I
he
don't
know it?
know if he knows that. I know that sometimes when I visit my high school, I'll say hello and thank him. But he's actually played a really huge role. I think a lot of the math teachers I've had in my life have played a big role, whether they know it or not. So Mr. Chicolo was like one of my first favorite math teachers. But then in college, I had a teacher called Miss Ty, where, Calculus 2 is one of the hardest classes at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Pretty much anybody in STEM has to take the class, especially engineers. And I took that class, and I remember there was an exam I took, and I turned the page, and I literally knew nothing on the page from memory. So I was like, I'm about to fail this exam. But eventually, she and I worked together. She worked to help me kind of develop my skills, but I ended up acing our final, even though there was multiple choice on a math exam, which is very diabolical if you know what math is like. So, like, what are we doing? There's no partial credit. Yeah. So I was like, that's crazy. But when I did well on the exam, that was what I needed to do well in the class. That class taught me that I could do hard things. And so when I learned that I could do hard things, I decided eventually to then pursue math as a major and pursue this field of economics, which has been a very hard thing.
And then her parents finally said,
Yeah.
"Thank God she picked something."
Right. She stuck
Listen,
with it. It
in
worked
the
out.
book, I talk about how my mom initially was really against me changing my major because, of course, she wanted, a medical doctor in the family. But it was when I got into Harvard
Yeah.
that she was
Right.
like, okay, this makes sense. So
Like,
this
I
is
guess
fine.
this is fine. I guess this is fine.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that keep me going. But if I want to say like what the through line is, it's probably community. I'm very grounded in like the people around me. I think it's important to talk to people from all different backgrounds. But I also think like your life should be informed by those people as well. They always say that you're kind of like the average of the closest people around you. And so I found in this season that like I really like my parents. I like talking to them a lot. They drive me crazy at times, but like I really do love them. I love talking to my parents. My siblings and I have gotten closer. I'm now an aunt, so I was talking to my niece the other day, and she's getting ready to apply to college, and I was just like,
You're not much older
right.
than these kids.
Right.
Thank you. Um,
You're like the
yeah,
friend
like the
aunt,
friend
the one that you can
aunt.
tell secrets
Yes.
to and not get in trouble with your parents.
And I have two other nieces who are under the age of 5, but like just being able to see them grow up and hopefully playing a role in their life and being able to like shape the kind of experiences that they get to have, like that to me is also so humbling. And then I think my educators have played such a huge role in just how I believe in myself and believe in my ability to do a lot of these things. But then also like on a more immediate impact, I would say are the people who contribute to sort of things that I'm doing right now. So the book was a huge group project. I cannot, like, you'll see that throughout the book, I say we a lot because I cannot, in good conscience, be like, I did this. Like, it's just not true. We had,
Well, in your first book, it was a
exactly.
lot of
Yes. So it's like,
contributors.
I like group projects when everybody's pulling their weight.
I gave you some material I thought sure you'd include in the book,
What
but
was the
once
material, Jim?
again, I didn't make the cut.
But you see what I'm saying, though? I just think like doing things with other people is so joyful. It's so fun, and you learn from each other, and it ends up going further, in my opinion. Right? There's this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think that for me, that I kind of embody that in my entire life. And of course, I'm connected to my faith and that sort of thing that also grounds me as well. But that even in that, I'm also really rooted in community, right? Because a lot of that stuff is just connected to who is around you and who encourages you and who empowers you. And so that is what I feel like has helped me sort of maintain a level head. And then, yeah, I don't know. I think the other thing too is a lot of this is like an extension of who I am. So I actually really like talking to people about issues that matter to me and turning it into things that people can access really easily. So whether or not it's on like social media or in a book, like that to me feels like an extension. It doesn't feel like I'm doing extra effort to kind of prove that I'm something that I'm not. And I think that honoring your truest self at the end of the day is like the best way to like not burn out.
All right, so you graduate from the University of
Yes.
Maryland.
Baltimore County, because there's several universities in Maryland. Yes.
It's a big system. One of our board members here at Flowers is one of the most famous alum of the University
Really?
of Maryland, All-American named Len
That name
Elmore.
sounds familiar.
He's old. He's my age.
You're young, Jim.
Oh, I've heard you
It's hard
accuse me of being old. I don't
It's hard
forget
to keep
that.
up with
Listen.
him, I will say. It is very hard to keep up with him. He wakes up at like
That's
4
crazy.
a.m., so he's beating me.
Well, that's just because I'm old and have to go to the bathroom.
Season. Yes.
So you graduate from the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And what happens next? How do you wind up going to the Kennedy School at Harvard to pursue a PhD in economics and policy? That's a big jump. How does that happen?
I'm screaming. They didn't. So the way that happened was when I was at UMBC and I had changed my major to math, shortly after, the president of our university, Dr. Freeman Rabowski, actually gave me a call. And he said, hey, can you actually come to my office? Like, I would love to talk to you about an opportunity that's coming to the university. So it turns out like around the time that I changed my major, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation was about to give UMBC like a multi-million-dollar grant to get more minorities into economics. And the pathway to get into economics at the graduate level is by studying math. And so essentially the timing, it's not a lottery, but again,
It's sounding awfully close.
Your steps were ordered. Talking about faith, your steps
yeah.
were
And
ordered.
so one of my closest friends, had told me about economics. I'd asked him like, how are you using math to study community college outcomes? He's like, I'm doing this thing called economics. So I go and do a deep search into like, what is this? And, when I go and search, shout out to old white guys, but a lot of the guys look like you, Jim, right? And so, I see all these men and I say, they're at Harvard, they're at Yale. They started there and then they go back there, right? So I said, how on earth am I going to do this thing? And so I started an organization called the Sadie Collective with my co-founder, Fanta, because we were both in spaces where this was the reality. And we realized that like we actually had more access to resources than our friends did. And so how do we create kind of a community, going back to what I was saying before, where we can pull these resources together and hopefully get more of us into these spaces. So when you look up the word economist, you're not just seeing one hue or one type of person.
So tell me about this Sadie organization. Its purpose
The
is
purpose
to
is
what?
to expand access to economics and related fields to minorities and students who are of low income backgrounds. Yes, initially it was founded as making sure that we're bringing attention to the underrepresentation of Black women and girls, but ultimately we're filling a bigger gap that we thought. So now other minorities are included, low-income folks are included. So think like the McNair Scholars Program, which also supports minorities and low-income students who are interested in grad school. This essentially is like sort of pre-grad school program for economics and related fields.
All right. So how did you get
So got to Cambridge by essentially graduating first and foremost with honors, yes, and then doing this fellowship program at Harvard for a year, which was a great experience. But I realized that I wanted to like spend some time touching grass and not being around academics, and so I spent a lot of time in the policy world, the corporate world, and realized sometime in between those experiences that I think it's important to know how to use data and know how to talk about data. And a lot of people don't know how to do both. And so what if I just go and do this PhD, learn the tools that I need to decipher what the numbers are saying, and then be kind of like the people's economist. You know what I'm saying? Like be able to go back to the people and say, hey, this is what these numbers mean. And this is why these numbers matter to you and why they should matter to you. And so that's kind of been my mission since then. And I do remember when I got into Harvard, I can tell a quick story about that. So I had gotten rejected from all the other schools that I applied to. I only applied to like 5 schools, but I had kind of used it as like a test of whether or not I should go to grad school at all. I'd also simultaneously applied for a job on the Hill. So the week that I got the interview for the job on the Hill, I got a phone call from a professor here. And he was like, hey, do you have a moment? And I had already emailed him saying like, hey, man, I know I didn't get in. Let's just talk about it later and we'll strategize and I'll reapply. And he called me. He said, you got in. And I said, you're lying. I told him he was lying 10 times. I was like, you're lying. You're lying. And then I started screaming. And I was at my parents' house at the time. So my parents run down. They're like, what's going on? I said, oh my God, I'm getting to Harvard. I just couldn't like verbalize. And then my mom fell down. She's like, oh my God. It was just really dramatic. And Joe was on the phone the entire time laughing. But yeah, so it was just like a great experience. And I think since being here, I've kind of found that being at a place like Harvard is really about how do you leverage the platform that this institution brings you, but also how do you connect with the communities that exist within the institution to further a goal, further a purpose, further a mission that you have. And so for me, that's kind of been my experience here, trying to link up with different student groups, but also trying to be affiliated with different institutions within Harvard, like the Women in Policy program, public policy program that has done a lot of really great work for advancing women in general. And also has been a really big driver behind this book.
Where are you in your journey? How deep into the program are you?
It is, yeah, because people always say, when do you finish? And the answer for PhD students is, we never know. We never know when the data figures itself out. But I'm in my 5th year now. I just became a 5th year, I guess, last week. Yeah, so thank you so much. And so my hope is to hopefully be out in 6. So really I'm finishing up my second to last year and then going on the job market and hopefully becoming a professor would be amazing. I just spent my semester teaching students and I loved it. It was just like the best experience. It's super fulfilling. Another example of an extension of myself. So it never felt like I was burnt out. Just felt like I was meeting a need.
At Harry and David, we work with our hands as well as our hearts, so you can enjoy sharing it as much as we enjoy making it. And that's what life's really all about, sharing with those we're closest to, no matter how far we are apart. Harry and David, share more.
I think that's phenomenal. And speaking of meeting a need, what I found so beautiful about your story, whether it's with Double Tax or the Sadie Collective, is that you were trying to pull together all of these resources for people. But now, instead of just cultivating resources, you've created one with Double Tax. So what was the moment where you sat down and you said, I need to write this book? What was the moment or the problem that you saw that said, I have to be the one to do this? And I know you say we, and we're giving everyone else their flowers too, no pun intended about flowers, but what but what was that moment like where you just said, I have to do this?
Yeah, it's a great question and I really appreciate it. I was giving a talk maybe back in 2022. It was right around the time the Black Agenda, which is the first book that I edited, came out. And, there's a framework that guides this book. It's called Black Women Best. It's coined by Janelle Jones, who's the first Black woman to be the chief economist at the Department of Labor. So for folks who don't know, when you see unemployment numbers, those numbers are coming from the Department of Labor, right? And so the idea is that the best outcome for Black women, or really any marginalized group, is a better outcome for everyone else. So if I'm worse off than you, making me better off will make you even more better off because you're better off than me. And so I had given this talk. I thought that the thesis was clear. And then I step down and a man walks up to me and he says, okay, thanks for giving the talk, but are Black women really that worse off? And I say, now, where were you during the talk? Maybe you were in the bathroom the whole time. But it was a good question. I said, yeah, I believe so. That's kind of what the data shows. He says, yeah, but are there any other examples? Are there examples of if we make Black women better off, everybody will be better off? And I said, yeah, there are. And then he said, can you show me them? And I realized I could maybe point to one or two off the top of my head. But if I actually had to point to something that existed that kind of summed up this thesis, I couldn't. A lot of the information is scattered Like sometimes it'll be featured for Black History Month. Sometimes it'll be featured for Women History Month. Sometimes it'll be in an academic article you can't even access. Sometimes it'll be behind a paywall. And that's when I was like, I wonder if somebody can write a book about this. Like maybe there's a book about this somewhere. And then I sort of started to look and noticed that nothing like that existed. And I said, now I needed something like this for my dissertation, right? For those who don't know,
that's where I was going to go.
Right, like I need it for my thesis. For those who don't know, so this is what I.
So you can you can use his
right.
body of work in multiple ways.
That's right. And so I was like, I wonder, like, can someone create this? And then I was like, I think I'll just write it. Like I was like, I have the knowledge, I have the capacity, and I'm so passionate about it. I think there's a way that we can convey this that doesn't feel so academic, because a lot of the existing resources either feel too casual and not rooted in evidence enough, or too much rooted in evidence. And I say too much in the sense that almost inaccessible. The language that they're using is not geared towards the public. It's geared towards policymakers or professors. And so they're not really talking to everyday people.
Lots of jargon.
Well, I think the point you made earlier about the premise of your book, that is, if you help, I think people view the world as a zero-sum game. And you say, well, if you're going to help that person over there, that's going to be to my detriment. And your underlying theory here is, if I help that person over there, it'll make my life better too. Give us a little evidence to that.
I think one way to think about that is, let's talk about, we were talking about babies earlier, maternal mortality. So this idea of, if you make birth safer for Black women by prioritizing midwives and doulas, right? Midwifery, by the way, is a huge, huge way in which people have births in other countries like Japan and parts of Europe, right? You're improving the maternal mortality rate for Black women, but those services now become more accessible to everyone else, right? And so this idea of prioritizing solutions that are aimed at those who are the least, like the worst off, basically, or the most vulnerable, is what I would say here, means that people who are better off than those vulnerable people will also have those benefits. Let me maybe give you a very practical example of what I'm talking about. When you go to a building these days, there's steps and then there's ramps. The ramps are intended for people who are disabled, right? People who cannot walk up those steps. But let's say that you have an injury that day. You can't really move your knees the way you want to move your knees. You might take the ramp. The ramp wasn't necessarily intended for you. It was intended for somebody who was worse off than you, but you still benefited. That's what I mean by Black Women Best. That's what I mean by ensuring that we have services and policies that are intended to help those who are worse off, right? But end up benefiting those who are better off. Another example I can give you is the following. If we're thinking about things like workplace professionalism, right? It's a bit innocuous. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe you go to one workplace and professionalism is one way. Maybe you go to another one, it's another way. The policing around hair and expression, right? If you are targeting how someone is dressing, especially for Black women, this usually comes down to our hair, right? And you're punishing them for how they look, right? That could also spill over to somebody else who's of a different race. Maybe they're wearing something that, you know, is showing their shoulders. Suddenly that becomes an issue, right? And so if you're targeting solutions around, you know, professional dress and making sure that people feel included, right, in how they look at the workplace, but also keeping in mind standards and stuff like that, you also end up benefiting other groups that are typically not targeted by policies like that as well. So that's what I mean by there's what we call this in economics, positive spillover effects, right? Of, you know, you put a policy in place for one group and it ends up benefiting another group as a result.
I think that's absolutely amazing. And bringing up even the policing around your appearance, I think of the Crown Act a lot that you were discussing. So thank you for bringing that up. And in terms of the double tax, now we talked about the pink tax a lot, which there are so many examples from. I think Ellen DeGeneres actually had an episode about the BIC, like pens for women because they were pink and they were like $1.50 more expensive than just navy pens, just because they were pink, because women need special pens, which I thought was absolutely hysterical. But with the double tag,
Women need pens?
you know,
What for?
I have no idea. Like, women write? Women write? It's a concept, right? Right. And so with Double Tax, you have this amazing book, and the foreword is by Chelsea Clinton. So you talked about community, relationships.
Hold it. Beep, beep, beep. How'd that happen?
Right.
Do you want to know like the real story here?
No. What is a made-up story?
Twitter, literally. So I'm not joking. So she liked something of mine, and then she followed me. And I was like, and so I followed her back. And then I'm really bold. I mean, that's kind of clear now, but like I'm very bold person. So I just
you and I are so much alike. You're bold and I'm bald.
And so I messaged her, and it was during COVID. So I said, do you want to just like hop on a Zoom and chat? She was like, sure. And so from that chat, I learned that she had also gotten her PhD. And so she actually advised PhD students as part of her journey. So she became a mentor and an advisor to me. And it just happened to be Chelsea Clinton at the time. And over the years, I've just like relied on her for guidance and advice. She's also just been extremely supportive, especially on a lot of the public facing things I've done. So she was extremely helpful for the Black agenda getting out there. And obviously she's now part of this project. But I think why I'm such a fan of Chelsea is because she's really committed to the work. There's not a lot of people who are committed to like using their platforms and really pushing for things like this. And I think the fact that she is extremely admirable. And obviously she takes it after her mom, right? And her dad. And so I think that, seeing her kind of be in her own right, an incredible leader, and also, being a friend, she like her referring to me as a dear friend is always very touching and a little surreal because I'm like, I don't know why I know a Clinton, but got it. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of how we met and how things have sort of evolved over time. But I'm very, very lucky to have her in my life, and I'm very grateful to her as well.
From gratitude to comfort, new beginnings to birthdays, celebrate life's moments with something special. Find the perfect gift at Harry and David. We make it easy to be thoughtful. Speaking of your life, Michaela was talking about how, she's complaining about how I make her work hard around here. Tell us what a typical day is in your life. You're doing all this work. You're a speaker. You're a writer. You're a student. You're a teacher. What does your day look like?
Yeah, maybe I can give you a sense of what my week was like last week. A little wild. So, I also am an early riser. Not 4 a.m. That's a little nuts.
I know. He's built different. He's built different.
But like 5:36, I don't know why at the top of this year, my body has been putting me down to like at 10 p.m. So I'm getting my full night's rest. And I'll wake up. I'll usually just like check emails. And now what's happening is I'm talking to people in different countries that are hoping to have the book come over there. And so I'll check emails, I'll respond to emails, and then I'll get ready. I'll catch the bus from where I'm living. And then I'll head to campus.
What do you eat in the morning?
What do I eat in the morning? Nothing, which my trainer gets really mad at me about. I need to eat. Yes, but like when I eat, I'll eat like a lot of protein. So like some veggie sausage, some eggs, and like some sort of carb. I don't eat enough carbs apparently, so I'm working on that. But this morning I had that was basically my breakfast, and I had like a biscuit or something like that, just to like fuel. And then afterwards, what I will usually do is like on the day where I'm teaching or co-teaching really, because the professor will be teaching and then I'm helping with the class. I will go to the class. Usually students will ask questions after the class, and then I have meetings throughout the day. So either I'm meeting with students, meeting with my boss, meeting with others, like other students who I'm working with, so collaborators, meeting with book folks. So that is a massive team. That's either the editorial team or it's the publicity team or the marketing team. And now there's international folks in the mix. And then, those meetings will be like mixed in with, kikiing with my friends, right? I'll see hey, what's going on? So I'll be laughing, I'll be cracking jokes and just hanging out with folks. I think finding joy and finding moments of laughter throughout the day kind of keep me like very grounded. And then at some point in the day, I'll kind of do more emails, kind of start to unwind, head back home. I love watching TV. I love my favorite thing to watch on YouTube is people reacting to shows I've already watched because it's just like very, I don't know, it's like very calming, but also the reactions are really funny. So I just like watching that. And then obviously talking to friends, calling my parents, or my parents will call me, just like having, community interactions throughout the day and then closing out my night that way. And then we start it all over again. So that's usually during my busiest. And then if I'm speaking, throw travel into the mix, throw sort of prep into the mix. And so all of those things become part of the day. But yeah, it's a little wild now that I'm saying it out loud. I had to like give a career day talk to my former elementary school about 2 weeks ago, which was really amazing.
How did you do?
I think I did okay. I'm really excited. Kids are really honest. So like if it was whack, they'll tell you. And I think they were super excited. They were raising their hands a lot. And I was like, okay, this was, I think, a success. But like as I was talking about what I did, I was like, this is kind of crazy actually. Like my 20s it's only been like 9 years of my 20s and I've been able to do all these different types of career paths. And my career is actually just starting, so I have no idea where we're headed next. But I've been having a lot of fun.
I bet you do. So
Wait,
if
really?
if I'm lucky enough not to see you for the next 5 years, and we get together, and I'm still old, what do you hope has happened in the next 5 years?
I think I would love for the double tax to have gotten really far and become part of the zeitgeist. So, how we talk about the pink tax, I want people to say, oh, that's the double tax. Isn't that the double tax? Just be able to say as part of their language. But I also would love for some of those solutions in the book to have actually come into fruition. A lot of people ask me, like, what keeps me going? And it's the fact that I want my nieces to live in a better world than I live in.
When Michaela was telling me about you last week, she kept hitting on the fact that there seem to be dichotomies. That is, you're a mathematician, you're now an economist, and yet you're really into implementation. It seems like a theory and practice, which is different for some people, you seem to thrive in making theory become practice.
That is probably one of the kindest things anybody's ever told me. Thank you so much for saying that, Michaela.
I didn't say it. I don't agree.
I must say, Michaela.
You see, good cop, bad cop.
Listen, that's exactly right. And I have one of my favorite educators. I always say I have a Mount Rushmore of educators. One of my favorite educators, Dr. King, who was one of the reasons why I decided to major in math and eventually pursue economics. She once said to me, Anna, I think you're going to be a triple threat. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you know how to do research, you know how to understand research, and you know how to communicate research. And oftentimes, researchers fall into one of those categories, not all three. And so I think I'm in the position now where I've been flexing this muscle of really trying to do all three at the very highest level. Because I think it's less about, me getting accolades, me having huge career wins, which I think are going to come along with the journey, but more about like, how can I really maximize impact? How can I really improve the lives of as many people as possible? And I think that being good at all three of those things and really dedicating myself to maybe being among the best of all three of those things will help people have better lives, quite frankly. And so if that's what it takes, I'm willing to do it.
So you want to achieve the ultimate, which is doing well while doing good.
Yes. And I don't think those things are mutually exclusive, despite what people think. I think those things oftentimes are very complementary and are necessary.
All right. So when you look out there, who are some of the people you admire and respect the most? It doesn't have to be someone we'd all know, but just, you mentioned before that you were interested in some of the malaria work that had gone on in Ghana. And there's been amazing things done there. And with the amazing things done there weren't the most expensive things. That's what I think was really clever. Because there's so many people who got involved there. Certainly the Gates Foundation has made a big impact there. And frankly, the U.S. government has made a huge impact as well. Who are some of the people you really admire when when you're thinking about the inventory of people you've met and the people you've studied about in your work? Who jumps up on that list as people you'd like to be included with?
Yeah, let me maybe mention two people. Obviously, I'll say the standard. My family, my parents, love them, right? But I would say there's two women, especially, who have made a huge impact on my life, and I don't think they'll ever understand how big of an impact. The first is my elementary school principal, believe it or not. So Miss Anna Puma, shout out to Miss Anna Puma, my namesake. She, I think the way that she cared about us when she was building up a school taught me that like education is really foundational to society, and good educators are really, really important. And having champions is really important. I remember there was a time where, so I'll add this caveat. So I was the person who desegregated my school, by the way. So first Black person to graduate from my elementary school. Granted, it was a new school, but essentially, no. But to that point, right? Um, because I was like the only Black girl for a while, she would pull me into her office and just pour into me. I remember there was a moment where my parents at the time they weren't able to get me Christmas gifts that Christmas, and somehow gifts showed up at our house. Turns out it was Miss Puma had bought all these gifts, and she had bought at the time American Girl dolls were all the rage, super expensive. But they had one Black American Girl doll. So someone had invited me to an American Girl doll party. I showed up with a headless Barbie. Clearly not, clearly not the vibe. But she bought me my first American Girl doll, and I think it was my first and only, quite frankly. And she looked like me. And so she's been extremely impactful in a way that I don't think she will ever understand. Like when I think about her, I want to cry because I don't really know what my life would be if she didn't offer the full ride, if she wasn't instrumental in the next steps that we took. And I've invited her to every graduation since. When she showed up at my high school graduation, I just cried for like 15 minutes. And then the second person is someone I think a lot of folks actually know. So this is Dr. Lisa Cook, Governor Lisa Cook, who is the first African-American woman to serve on the Federal Board of Governors. So the Federal Board of Governors, for those who are listening, is like the group of economists who oversee the economy, right? They make sure that the interest rates are what they need to be. They also make economic policy recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. So Dr. Cook, who's the first Black woman to serve on that body, was the first Black woman economist I ever met. And so, I mean, I kind of lucked out because she was also one of the most premier economists in the profession. But the way that she took me under her wing, like very early on, I remember I was like, hey, can you mentor me? I didn't know what else to say. I was like, I heard that we need mentors and I'm asking you. And she was immediate in her support and immediate in the kind of love and sisterhood, quite frankly, that she demonstrated. And it has had a profound impact on, I think, this latter part of my journey. A lot of people are asking, like, where do things begin? And I think it actually does begin with Dr. Cook. When before I even knew what economics was, she was kind of the first person to say, you can do this. And I didn't even know what I could do. And she's also someone who I think has no ego, right? So she's seen me do all of these things and she just keeps saying, keep going. Whereas I think some people, I think, will feel some type of way about a younger person maybe advancing maybe too soon or whatever. I think her deep commitment to seeing the next generation thrive is what keeps me going as well. Like just having someone like that in my corner has been phenomenal. So I would say those two women especially have played a huge role in my life.
Well, Michaela, I'm going to ask you an unfair question, which is from our conversation today, what are your takeaways from it? Because I think Anna is the triple threat.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank
parents,
you.
while they're very proud of her, are wondering when the heck is she going to start making a living?
I have a few takeaways. One of the
Yes.
first ones is really seeing a need and filling a need. And you've done that with Double Tax, with the Black Agenda. You saw those gaps. And what's so beautiful is not only did you fill those gaps by yourself, but you brought that community with you to
Mm,
be a part of that
yeah.
conversation. And I think it talks a lot about your values and what is so important to you, whether it's your family or these mentors who continuously pour into you so that you can do these things. But
Yeah.
now you're giving that to the community and giving a voice to not only just a group of people, Black people, other marginalized communities, but other authors who may not have had their moment in the spotlight had
Right.
you not done that. So that's number one, being able to see a need and fill a need. And number two is just really the ability to dream without bounds, because you have accomplished so much. Your steps were ordered, and you're not even 30 yet, right? And you've accomplished
Yeah.
all of these things. And so we're wondering what's next. And a lot of times people will get afraid about their potential or what their life could look like, that they're afraid to dream. But you don't do that. You're like, okay, let's go for it. Like, all right, graduated from Harvard. What's next? Maybe I'll make another Ivy school on my own. Who knows? I don't know what's next, but I'm excited to see what that looks like for you. And if
Yeah.
you could give our viewers any piece of advice, what would it be from your perspective?
Yeah. I think be rooted in community. Community will take you very, very far. And I also think really, whatever you decide to pursue, think about the people who are coming up behind you, because that will keep you going. I think that knowing that there's young people who are definitely coming up behind me is why I want a clear path. And so, whatever I can do,
Well, I
I,
think
I
one
always, I, oh, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
I think one thing that we'll say when
Yeah.
we gather next is that you two guys have hit it off, and you're two peas in a pod.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to ask, and I suspect you two are already friendly, and I suspect you're going to become friends
Yes.
because you're very much alike. And I think the common thread isn't the intellect, it's there, clearly, but it's the social ability. You both
Mm.
have terrific personalities, you care about other people, that's very evident. And I
Thank
think
you,
that's
Jim.
not properly accredited in terms of the success that the two of you have had
Mm.
and will
Hmm.
continue to have. You know, when
Yeah.
I met Michaela a little over a year ago, I was doing a class with my friend Jeff Sonnenfeld, Associate Dean of the Yale School of Management,
Hmm.
and I've done that, I guess, for about 7 or 8 years now. And there's a group of three of us that are permanent, and then we have a guest lecturer come in on a rotating basis each year. And I met Michaela there last year, and she was a TA and the president of her graduating class.
Of
But I could
course.
see that everybody liked her, that she was everybody's friend. When I walked through the hall with her, people saw her coming, and immediately they started to smile because you two both have that common. You're interested in doing for others. And I
Mm.
think that on your resume of skill sets and assets that help you to have a good life and be successful and get ahead, it's the fact that you're nice, you care about other people, and you go out of your way to help. What a joy it was to have Anna Gifty on Power and Impact with us today. She's an amazing young lady. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a message, or do a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please send them our way. Until next time, I'm Jim McCann here at Power and Impact, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.